So this video is going to show you how to make your applique sample. Now there are a few things that we need. We need a pair of fabric scissors, a lead pencil. I'm going to use a ruler or something with a straight edge I can use. A rectangle of calico. This is going to be our base fabric that we're going to apply our applique to. A scrap of woven fabric. So that is fabric that isn't stretchy when you pull it along the grain line. And also some felt. So we're going to do two types of applique. And the really important thing we need is this stuff here called Fix. So this is a iron-on fusible webbing that's going to act like a glue layer between our calico, our base fabric, and our applique fabrics. You can see here an example. So first things first, you'll be given a scrap of Fix. Okay, that just happened to be one that was in there. And we're going to do a shape. Okay, we're going to do two shapes that are the same. It's going to give us the chance to practice curves and turning corners. Now, when you have your Fix, there are two sides to it. So one side is smooth, which is this side, kind of like baking paper. The other side is rough. This side is rough. You can see that there's actually a layer of glue there. It's really fine. I'm just trying to pick it up so I can show you. So what we're going to do with our Fix is I'm going to just roughly divide it in half to do my two shapes. Now my two shapes are actually going to be the same. Now when you use this, you only need the amount required for your design. And you try to reduce your wastage. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do two shapes that are kind of like a D shape without the middle bit. Okay, so what this is going to do, this is going to give me some corners and a curve to practice. Now I'm drawing it out so I kind of make use of most of that piece of Fix. So I've got two shapes there. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut this in half. And I'm going to iron it to the wrong side of my fabric with the rough side facing down and the wrong side of my felt. Now this is a scrap, so I'm not too concerned about that, but I have a big piece of felt here. So with the felt, I want to kind of find an end that I can use without creating too much wastage. And I want to cut out my felt so it is only slightly bigger than my Fix. Okay, so I have one piece there. And I'm just going to do the same with my little scrap as well. I'm just going to cut it out so it's a little bit bigger. Alright, it's important not to waste anything if we don't have to, because that just kind of goes to landfill and creates more rubbish for us to dispose of. So I've got my two fabrics, my woven and my felt, with my Fix shape on top, and I've placed it so it is the rough side facing the wrong side of the fabric. Now with felt there isn't a wrong side, both sides are exactly the same, but with this fabric you can see that there is a right and a wrong side. So if you look at the wrong side, It's slightly lighter and rougher looking, whereas the right side of the fabric, the side we want showing, has a much smoother and darker finish. Some right and wrong sides are really obvious, some aren't obvious. If they're not obvious, you could just put it on any side. So now we're going to move over to the iron. Okay, so I'm at the ironing board. I've got my iron on and I've got it set to cotton. And there's a little bit of water in there for steam, but I don't want to use steam, so I'm going to turn that off. Okay, I've got my 2 pieces of fabric with the Visofix rough side facing down, facing the wrong side, and the fabric is slightly bigger. I also have some scrap paper here, thin butcher's paper, and I'm going to put these between the paper. What that's going to do, it's going to protect the ironing board from the glue, and it's going to protect the iron from the glue as well. So what I do is I put my hot iron on top of my paper where my fabric is, and I'm just going to move it around for about 30 seconds. And then I can stop and check to see if it's stuck. Okay. So I can peel off my fabric and I can check to see if it's glued on. Okay, definitely glued on, which is great. Now what I can do is I can cut out my shape. It is good when you have a shape to leave a little edge of Visofix, so when you do cut it out you get a really perfectly neat shape. Okay, so there's my woven fabric, and this is my felt fabric. So the next step is you can see there's a little bit of glue come off there. Your piece of calico, put it on your paper, and then you're going to have to find the edge, your Visofix, and peel it off. When you peel that off, you can feel that the fabric feels different now because it has a layer of glue on there. Okay, so I'll pop it onto my calico and then do the same with the felt. And you can, I don't know if you can see that, but you can see that there's a layer of glue on there now. Pop that down, pop your paper back over and iron it. Peel off your paper and then check to see is it stuck on. Awesome. Now this is only a temporary fix. We need to stitch these to actually make them permanently sewn to the calico. Okay. Okay, so I'm at my machine now. I've got my calico sample with my woven fabric and my felt fabric applique applied. I got a little bit of scrap fabric doubled over, and I've got a matching bobbin and thread that is contrasting to these two colors. The reason I've got that is for your sample, I want a really clear example of how you've gone. So if your thread's contrasting, I can really see how well you've done it, and it allows me to give you some feedback a little bit easier. So at this point, thread up your machine, and we're going to start with straight stitch, which is stitch number 13, width 0, length 2.5. Okay, so with my scrap piece of fabric folded over, I can just check my stitching to make sure it's okay before I go ahead. Now remember your take up lever always up the top when you finish. Okay, that looks good. Now we're going to do two types of applique stitches. The first one is straight, and that is used for felt only, because felt is a fabric that doesn't fray, so we can use a straight stitch. Whereas for this one, which can fray, we're going to use an applique stitch, which is a really close together zigzag. So to begin with, I'm going to line up a point of my presser foot. So for me, I'm going to use, so we know we've got this little etch which shows where the stitch line's going to be, and we've got this edge here. I'm going to aim to line it up in between those 2 points. And I'm not going to reverse stitch because I'll come back around and reverse stitch on top. So stitch, keeping my felt edge in that point, halfway between there. And when I almost get to the corner, I'm going to stop, use my hand wheel, leave my needle in and turn. And because I'm going around a curve, I'm going to use my toe tapping, trying really hard. You may need to stop and move your fabric by taking up the take up lever, like I just did there, to get around. Or you could use your hand wheel. Okay, so I'm continuing to toe tap and use my take up lever to maneuver my fabric, and also my hand wheel to get around any tricky spots. Now I'm almost at the corner again, so I'm using the hand wheel. I'm just going to lift that up so I can get it in the spot I want. And I'll just move that thread out of the way. Oops, where is it there? Alright, and I'm going to go back and meet up with my stitch line and do a teeny tiny reverse, like 2 stitches worth. Okay, so that is my felt applique. I can cut my threads now. Nice and short. Okay, so you can see on here, I've turned my corners really well, and I've tried really hard to keep a nice even distance between the stitch line and the edge of the felt. So now that's permanently sewn in place. Next, I'm going to do the applique stitch on the woven fabric, but I need to change my stitch settings. So I'm going to put it on number 12, and I'm going to change my width to, now your width, you can go anywhere from kind of like 3 to 6, maybe let's go in the middle, 4.5, and this is going to be quite small. This is going to be half. Now I'm not going to start stitching straight away. I'm going to use my scrap piece of fabric to test that stitch to see how big it is and whether I want it that big. Okay, so that's the stitch. I might actually make it a little bit narrower, so I'm going to go down to 3. Okay, I reckon I'm happy with that width. So I've got it on zigzag, width 3, length half. Now with this one, I'll just put my threads to the back. We're going to do the woven now. Now the woven's good because it locks in that edge of fabric to stop it from fraying. But you have to work out, you can see with zigzag your needle goes side to side. And you want that needle to sit in the edge of your fabric. So right on the edge. If you can see that, it's right on the edge. So when you stitch, it just hits the edge of the fabric. I'm just using my hand wheel to show you. Alright, so I'm going to sew that. This takes longer because it's a close together zigzag. So it does take a little bit longer compared to just a straight stitch. Now I'm going to use a hand wheel because I want to get right in that corner. So right in that corner. So I'm in the corner on the edge of the fabric. You may have to manipulate your fabric to get it to that point, but that's where you want to stop. And then I'm going to go around that edge, around my curve using toe tapping and making sure that needle just hits the edge of my fabric. And I'm just using a bit of force here to get it to go around the curve. This is quite difficult, but if you can take your time and try really hard, you'll get a really good finish. Now I'm just going to put my needle in and move my work a little bit by lifting up the take-up lever. Now I'm almost at the corner. Now here I'm going to have to get it to go right in that corner, I'm going to have to move my material and lift up my take-up lever. Then I can continue. When I go over where I started, I'm going to do a teeny tiny reverse stitch. Just a couple stitches worth. Cut my threads. And there you can see my applique stitch. So you can see how it locks in that edge to stop it from fraying. Here, it's probably not quite on the edge, so it's a little bit frayed there, but I could trim that off really carefully with a pair of scissors. So I can trim my threads, front and back. So that is the two examples of applique. So straight stitch only used for felt because the fabric won't fray, and applique zigzag stitch used for woven fabric to stop it from fraying. Okay.